We are only a few days away from the 2021 NHL Draft Lottery coming up June the 2nd. Today we're going to do a draft lottery simulation, and then we're going to do a mock draft for the top 10 selections. We'll jump into that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, today we're doing an NHL Draft Lottery simulation followed by a mock draft. This will be the fourth time we've done this since the beginning of the fall here when we first did our first one. So it's our fourth go with this, and we'll see how things turn out this time around. Now, we also have the newly updated NHL Draft Rankings for 2021 from NHL Central Scouting that we're going to be using here. And some of those, movement, I guess we'll say, and player rankings will certainly influence, I think, some of my selections on where I place certain players. So now we're going to hop onto the computer. We're going to tankathon.com. We'll run the simulation first to see where the picks lie, and then we'll follow that up with my top 10 selections. All right, so here we are on the computer. We're on tankathon.com. We have our 2021 NHL Draft Lottery Simulator all ready to go. So, of course, you see the teams here in order. Of course, in case a quick refresher, the Seattle Kraken have the third best odds. That's part of the agreement for them coming into the NHL as an expansion team. So that's where they sit. So essentially, they have the same odds as the New Jersey Devils, who were the third worst team, but they're given the fourth spot here in the list. But essentially, they're the same. Buffalo Sabres were the NHL's lowest ranked team, so they're the best odds. The Ducks are next, followed by Seattle, New Jersey, Columbus, Detroit, San Jose, LA, Vancouver, Ottawa is your top 10 teams with the best odds here. Of course, Arizona doesn't have a first round pick, which could complicate things matters here if they actually were to be successful and win. So now let's run the simulation and see who our lucky teams are. Boom, there it is. We have the Vancouver Canucks and the Ottawa Senators, both Canadian teams winning the two lottery spots, and both get a chance to move up 8 spots in this draft. That's absolutely huge. Vancouver Canucks, of course, had a very difficult season dealing with all the COVID stuff, and this could be a big reward for everything that they've been through. So now let's jump over here back, and we'll go through the top 10 picks here. Of course, starting with Vancouver, then we got Ottawa, then the rest will go in order that they were selected here based on standing. So Buffalo, Anaheim, Seattle, New Jersey, Columbus, Detroit, San Jose, and Los Angeles. The first overall pick, the Vancouver Canucks would probably select Owen Power. Owen Power, I have no doubt, is going to be going first overall in this draft. He's 6'6". He has all the tools to be a top number one defenseman. Draws comparison to a guy like Victor Hedman. He is a player that the Canucks would desperately need. Look at the young group of forwards that they've accumulated. They've got a solid young goaltender in Thatcher Demko. He could be that missing piece on the back end. And if the Canucks were so fortunate enough to get this pick, it would do wonders to moving this team big time in a big new direction here. With the number 2 overall pick, I have the Senators selecting the top center of the draft, Mason McTavish. Now, the NHL Central Scouting rankings that were just released have really pushed McTavish up the list here. They have him ranked as a number 2 North American skater, which was a big jump, but he really has all the tools. He's got the skill, the size, the speed. He can play with grit. He is the missing piece that the Senators don't have right now. They have decent center depth, but it's not deep enough to really make them into a true contender. At least they need another piece there, in my opinion. If you recall in my last video where we did a mock draft, the Senators ended up with obviously not as good luck on the draft and picked lower, and I still had McTavish being their guy. And I think with the new rankings and considering how strong of a year he's had, even at number 2, he's still the top choice for Ottawa. Third overall, the Buffalo Sabres would select another center, a U.S.-born player, Matthew Beniers. Beniers has been regarded for the most part in the last year as probably being the top center of this draft. But based on these recent draft scouting rankings, McTavish could have surpassed him here. But there are slightly different types of players as well. Kind of depends on what your team needs. And if this summer is as big of a summer for the Sabres and possibly moving on from guys like Eichel and Reinhart, they're going to have to rebuild their center depth with new young prospects. They have a guy like Dylan Cousins there. They have Casey Middlestat. We don't know, long-term if they're both going to be centers or not. So to me, a guy like Beniers makes a lot of sense. They have Rasmus Dahlin on the blue line, former first overall pick. So to me, it makes more sense to go for a forward or a center in this predicament, picking third overall for the Sabres. Picking 4th overall, we have the Anaheim Ducks, and this is going to complete our run on the top centers of the draft here with taking Kent Johnson from Michigan. Michigan is going to be putting out a lot of top players in this first round, but for me, the Ducks could use this kind of player. Their blue line is pretty decent. Of course, they got Jamie Drysdale last year. They have a goaltender in John Gibson locked up long term. They could use some more help at center. Johnson's a guy who's going to play maybe 1 or 2 years. It's hard to say how long he's going to stay at Michigan. Probably 1 more year for sure. So they likely bring back Captain Ryan Getzlav to keep that spot warm for him while Johnson's playing college hockey. They have some other guys like Trevor Zegras who can be a top center, and Johnson could slot in as that number 2 behind Zegras and give this team a lot of center depth for many years to come. Before we go on to the next selection, I just want to take a quick moment here and acknowledge our channel sponsor, Manscaped. Top Shelf Hockey is proud to be sponsored by Manscaped. Of course, with Manscaped, we have a special offer here for all Top Shelf Hockey viewers where you can get 20% off and free shipping into all orders at manscaped.com. Now, of course, Manscaped just launched a brand new Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, which is a fantastic product. They've taken the level up here, even again with the skin-safe replaceable blades. It's waterproof, it's wireless charging, has a travel lock on it, as well as a nice light so you don't miss what you're doing. So certainly a terrific product. Now, many people associate Manscaped with their trimmers, which is certainly kind of their top product, but they do have a lot of other great options as well, including what they call the Weed Whacker, which is another trimmer for your ears and nose. And they have a variety of deodorants and sprays as well, which also keep you fresh and are terrific as well. So certainly Manscaped has a lot to offer, and we certainly highly recommend all of their products. So check out manscaped.com and use promo code TSH for 20% off and free shipping. So thank you very much for watching that sponsored video. Now let's jump back into the top 10 selections. Next up, we have the first ever selection for the Seattle Kraken, and I have them taking the top European skater of the draft, William Eklund. Eklund was a top rookie in the SHL this year, had a terrific season, has really worked his way up the rankings throughout the course of the season as well. And like I said, being the top European-born player, I think makes a lot of sense for Seattle. They're going to be coming into this, obviously, with not much of anything. Of course, they have the expansion draft to get a bunch of NHL quality players as well. I think they're going to take a similar approach to Vegas, so they don't need to be in a huge rush. If Eklund's going to stay and play another year in Sweden, that's not a problem for them. They can let him develop over there. But he's a winger with a lot of speed who can be tough to play against, chipping offensively, and he's just a unique kind of player. And where Seattle's going to need a bit of everything, to me, he makes sense for a team in their situation. Next up, we have the New Jersey Devils, and I have them taking a top defenseman here, obviously the second-ranked defenseman according to Central Scouting, and based on my rankings, Luke Hughes, of course, is going to go play with his brother Jack in New Jersey. Of course, the Devils certainly need a defenseman anyway, and where they're going to be picking, I really think, regardless of how the mock draft goes here, I mean, this is just my opinion, but based on how the actual lottery works out, there's a really high chance that the Devils are going to end up with Luke Hughes, in my opinion, based on where they're picking, what they need. And he just makes a lot of sense, not only because he's Jack's brother, but just based on what they actually require. He fits the bill, and they can play together there for a long time and help take this team to a whole new level. Next up, we have the Columbus Blue Jackets, and I have them selecting winger Dylan Guenther. Now, Guenther is a really dynamic offensive playmaking type of player here, which could be, I think, a really good benefit here for a team like Columbus, who really needs offense in the worst way. Of course, he's a player that likely doesn't go straight to the NHL. He could play another year in the Western Hockey League for Edmonton. That is a real possibility. Of course, they did get some games in this year. He averaged 2 points per game, so you might argue that maybe he is ready. Before that, he was a point per game. The year before, putting up 59 points in 58 games. And then he put up 24 points in 12 games. So difficult to say where he ends up next year. But personally, I think he'd be a great fit for the Jackets. Next up, we have the Red Wings picking here, and I have them taking another top defenseman, Brandt Clarke. Now, in previous mock drafts, I've always had them taking the goalie, Jesper Wallstedt, who likely goes somewhere around the top 10 to 15 picks too. And they very well could do that. It does make a lot of sense. But in this predicament, with Brandt Clarke still being on the board, with the way this mock draft has worked out here, I just think he'd be a terrific choice for Detroit as well. Clark's certainly way closer to being NHL ready than Wallstedt would be. Wallstedt's likely a couple years out. They could get more of an instant gratification type of deal. He could be the top right shot defenseman that they really need, which is also really hard to find. And I don't think they could go wrong with a pick like Clarke, even though Wallstedt also makes a lot of sense, but Clarke does as well. Now, as you can see here, we have the San Jose Sharks taking defenseman from Sweden, Simon Edvinsson, and his draft stock has dropped here a little bit. Personally, I thought his play at the U18s were a little bit underwhelming. His rankings between the European skaters has dropped a little bit as well. And I just think that, he's still going to be a good player. He's got good size, great defenseman. A team like San Jose makes a lot of sense. They got guys like Burns, Carlson, Vlasic locked up long term. They're still going to be a while before those contracts are in a spot where they can move on from them. So he can continue to develop, likely over in Sweden for a little while longer before jumping to North America. And it can be an impact on the Sharks blue line down the road. But when he gets there, some of those guys that could still be there to be good mentors for him while he's working his way up through the ranks here. To finish out our top 10, we have the LA Kings taking the top goalie in the draft, Jesper Wallstedt. Now, as I mentioned in previous mock drafts, I think Detroit's a great landing spot for him, and they could use that pick because they're going to be picking higher than LA, most likely here, to get this player. But to me, he also makes a lot of sense for the LA Kings. They have a really deep group full of prospects that can play defense and center and wing. They have a lot of other stuff really looked after here, but they don't have as much depth in the goalie department, and he's a player who could probably be their top goalie prospect right away. Obviously, Jonathan Quick's not getting any younger. You've got Cal Peterson there, and they could use somebody like Wallstedt to jump into that lineup here in a couple years down the road. So he also makes a ton of sense for the Kings as much as he does Detroit. So those are my top 10 selections for the mock draft here. So certainly let me know what your thoughts are on these players. Where do you think they're going to end up going? Of course, let me know as well if there's a particular team you're rooting for and hoping that they'll get the first overall selection. So coming up on June 2nd, we'll find out for sure who wins the draft lottery, what the first set of selections are going to be. And then from there, we can start conducting mock drafts based on the actual results of where teams are going to be selecting. So let me know your thoughts and we'll discuss below in the comments. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest NHL news or rumors for all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.